Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics and the state legislature. I'm your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and I'm joined once again today by our co-host, Assemblyman Greg Wallis from the 47th Assembly District in Palm Springs. How's it going, Greg?
Going very well, Josh. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. And, happy to be up here in Sacramento and back to session.
Yeah. Thanks for coming back on. We didn't scare you off last time.
No, you tried your best, but you can't get rid of me that easily.
So speaking of back to session, so how's it going so far? Like we obviously, you and I both got elected in a year ago, sworn in a little over a year ago, and finished our first year. How did your first year go, and how are you feeling about this year?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, first year was great. You and I both obviously have staff backgrounds, so got to come up here with a little bit of background knowledge, but there were definitely some things that I wasn't aware of and learned about pretty quickly. Back up in year number 2, no one warned me that we just jump right back into it. It's off to a quick start.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty interesting so far. A lot going on. I know we'll talk a little bit today about the tackle football stuff that went down last week, and then a lot of public safety stuff going on, and obviously a giant budget deficit that we have to deal with as a state. So, a lot of major topics that are already coming before us. So it's been pretty quick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of challenges for us to address this year, and the work has already begun. So that's good. Yeah,
and then we're also both on the Problem Solvers Caucus. So I feel like that's been going pretty well, and we might actually see some progress this year on some public safety issues. So.
Yeah, no, I love that group, the Problem Solvers Caucus. I know last year we had a lot of new members and a lot of folks just getting their feet wet in it. But I think year number 2 here for us is going to be really fantastic.
Yeah, it'll be good. It's interesting. Like, that first year you are kind of trying to figure out where you can push and where you can kind of find consensus, right? So I think we've definitely figured some of that out, which is exciting. So let's get into, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what went on in the last week in the legislature and in California politics. But, one of the big stories for me, because this is something that I've been working on a lot, was the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear this case from Oregon, the Grants Pass case, that's going to impact whether or not local jurisdictions and cities can clear homeless encampments and the rules surrounding that. Back in 2018, there was a ruling, the Boise versus Martin case, that basically said that you couldn't clear homeless encampments unless there was housing for each of those individuals available. It really was a broad brush, I think, that made it really difficult for local jurisdictions to enforce their policies and actually help folks get off the street. And so I think this is a big deal. The Supreme Court denied hearing that case a few years ago, and have actually accepted this Grants Pass case. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on it or if this is an issue in your community. I know it is in mine.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an issue throughout the state of California, and you're seeing these homeless encampments really, I mean, they're open air drug scenes. It's a public safety concern, and it's a public health crisis. And to have our localities have their hands tied and not be able to take action, I think is to the detriment, not just our communities, but the folks who find themselves in those situations. And I don't think it's a very compassionate approach to allow people to live out on the street like that. And so, obviously excited that the Supreme Court's willing to take this up. I don't know that the governor's ever been thrilled about having a conservative majority on the court, but maybe this will change his mind.
Speaking of that, that's been kind of the most fascinating part about this whole case is Governor Newsom has been very supportive of this. And his reaction was, he said, California has invested billions to address homelessness, but rulings from the bench have tied the hands, to your point, of state and local governments to address the issue. The Supreme Court can now correct course and end the costly delays from lawsuits that have plagued our efforts to clear encampments and deliver services to those in need. How weird is this, right? You've got a court that he very regularly criticizes that he is now fully supporting in acting on this case, and I think he's right.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it just goes to show you that, in politics, sometimes there's interesting bedfellows, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
on this issue, I think we can all agree that we want to work with the administration and work with the governor on,
yeah,
how we can address that issue, because it really, I mean, this isn't partisan, right? This is an issue that impacts all of our communities here in California.
yeah.
So,
No, for sure. It's such an important one, and this particular case, I think, is only one part of the equation, right? I mean, there's a lot of other things that have to be done to solve the homelessness crisis, but getting rid of kind of the red tape here, I think, is really important so that we can actually start getting people into programs and getting people back on their feet. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I don't know the timeline for when the Supreme Court is supposed to decide this, but I'm really grateful that they've decided to take this up. I think it was a few months ago when the new federal numbers came out, and they said that California is now home to 49% of the unsheltered homeless population in the entire nation, which is pretty mind-blowing statistic when you think about it.
oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's nuts.
But is it a surprise? I mean, we've all
Yeah.
been out in our communities. We've all been to LA, San Francisco, and
Yeah.
you see it everywhere you go now. And it's really something we do need to take seriously. And I think that this will be a step in the right direction.
Yeah. No, I agree. I thought it was interesting that there's a lot of elected officials on both sides of the aisle that kind of made supportive comments of the Supreme Court taking this case. But the one that didn't was LA Mayor Karen Bass. She actually kind of poured some cold water on it and said that she wasn't really a big fan of this. So I thought that's kind of unfortunate for Los Angeles, because it makes me worry about how they're going to be responding to the homelessness situation down there. But
Yeah, that's fascinating. But I mean, look, the Supreme Court isn't going to rule on this in a partisan manner. They're going to
Yeah.
look at the merits of the case, and depending on how they make a determination here, it's going to be on us as policymakers to put good policies in place to help out here.
for sure. So look forward to updating listeners on that in the future. Speaking of back to session, we also had, in the legislature, you've got bills that you introduce in the first year of a 2-year term. We're now entering the second year of a 2-year cycle. And we've got these things called 2-year bills that, for bills that didn't get worked out in the first year, you can bring them back in January. And a bunch of those just got discussed and debated in policy committees and fiscal committees the last couple weeks. You and I had a bill, AB 1408, that sought to give kids more opportunities and options in their education. Do you want to talk briefly about the bill? I know you took the lead on it, but I'm a big fan of the bill as well, and signed on as well.
Yeah, no, appreciate you being a joint author on that. We obviously introduced this bill last year. We got it, unanimously through Education Committee on a bipartisan vote, and it was unfortunately held on the suspense file in appropriations.
Yeah.
This year we were able to bring the bill back. Actually, it was different language in it. The chair of Education Committee asked us to gut and amend it. It is very rare that you get 2 bites of the apple here in Sacramento, but when the policy committee asks for that, it was something that we obviously said, yeah, let's move forward with it. With the change in the committee makeup, we got it again through unanimously on a bipartisan vote, and so was disappointed to see it held up on the suspense file again. I don't know what that means for this idea of school choice going forward. Our bill was very limited, very narrow in scope. It was low performing students and low performing schools have the ability to seek a transfer out of their district. All it really did was prevent the school you were leaving from holding you there.
Well, and this is the crazy thing about California education policy that a lot of people don't really realize is that, the districts really have a lot of control over, what students can go where. And so if you're a student that lives in one school district, for example, and maybe your parent works in another school district, right? And they want to send their child to the district over there. Well, that district can easily say, sure, come on over. But the home district where you live has the right to either approve or veto whether you get to leave their district. And there's very limited cases where they can't do that. And so we were trying to expand on that concept where, like, look, if you are a low-performing student who really could use a better academic option in another district, that this district, your home district, has no right to veto that transfer, right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
yeah,
And I think, look, we all appreciate, a more holistic approach. So we don't have these low performing schools in California. But the reality is that could take years. And even if it was able to get done in 5 years is a long time in a
yeah,
kid's K through 12 educational career. And, where this bill came from or why I was so passionate about it is my wife's a high school teacher. And when we had 2 years of remote learning, you saw kids coming back into the classroom with, needs that they didn't have before, and not all the schools were equipped to deal with that. So we just wanted to be able to help those kids out.
Yeah.
And I think I said this in the committee hearing actually, but if you're affluent, you've got the ability to move your kid to a private school. Heck, you could even pick up your house and buy in a different zip code. But it's those most disadvantaged kids in California that we really were trying to give a path, to a better education, because that's the foundation of their future, and that's the next generation of Californians. So it's so important that we help them. So again, disappointed it got held, but we'll keep working on it. I'm sure you and I will come up with something
for sure.
else.
We'll keep going. I mean, it's really can't say it any better. I mean, the school choice really does exist to people with means, right? And it's really the kids that aren't able to do that, to move or to go to private school or find some other option, that they get harmed by failing schools. And so I think to that point, though, to your point about struggling schools, I mean, obviously, yes, we want to lift up all of our schools, right? EdSource just did this report that actually ranked California below a number of states, including Arkansas and Colorado and Mississippi even, on preparing teachers for teaching literacy. I think that's a big part of why we're ranked 50th in literacy as a state. And at the end of the day, if kids can't get that basic literacy teaching and training and learn how to read at an early age, that's going to affect them through their entire academic journey. And so that's something that I look forward to working on this year as well, as I really want to do more as a state on improving literacy. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're on the education committee here, and I think you were on a school board previously before you were in the legislature. So happy to work with you on that. I know you're the expert. I'll let you take the lead this time.
No, it's all good. I thought it was great. I just feel bad because when you brought the bill up in committee, I was not there. And could not join you for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of abandoned you.
I had you in my remarks and everything. I think I said, and I'll be directing all the tough questions to my joint author, Assemblymember Hoover. So we had.
And then I didn't show up. Yeah, it was unfortunate. It's crazy. So I don't know about you, but they made some committee changes over this last, since the last year, and I'm now on 7 different policy committees, and a lot of them are at the same time and in different buildings. So I just find myself
I had that only
crazy.
On one instance last year, but I had Rev and Tax the same time I had transportation, and same time, different buildings. You're running back and forth trying to get to both of them, and it is challenging.
Some days it does not work very well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar with this issue, but I've been talking with some. There was a story in the Chronicle about Attorney General Rob Bonta joining a call for the federal government to rein in robocalls, particularly AI-generated scams. I don't know if you've been hearing about this, but I did a Scam Stopper event recently in my district, and we talked about this. And I talked to this woman in my one of my communities that said that she got scammed out of over $7,000 because a voice called her on the phone that sounded exactly like her son, said that he had been in a car accident, he needed this money. She sent the money, and it was just a complete made-up scam, AI-generated scam. And that is really terrifying. I mean, we know robocalls, we know phishing, we know these things that have kind of like clicking on bad links, stuff like that has been around. But this new level of scamming, I think particularly for people that aren't familiar with the technology, it's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's a serious issue. Actually, I'll share with you. I was on a flight up here to Sacramento, and you can kind of get texting on the flight on Southwest, and I'm getting these texts from my mom, and she goes, call me. And as soon as I get off the plane, I call her, what's going on, Mom? And she goes, you need to call your granddad right now. He thinks you're stuck in Mexico, and you need $15,000. So he's about to wire the money, but he thought, I should just call and check. And yeah, sure enough, it was the same sort of situation where they're able to make make a voice copy that sounds similar enough to me to make him think that, oh gosh, I got to help my grandson out. Fortunately, we were able to prevent that from happening, but it is a serious concern. Actually, down in my district, we do this event every year called the Desert Town Hall Speaker Series, and they always have a diverse lineup of speakers. There's 4 events. Last year, my wife and I were able to go see Frank Abagnale, the Catch Me If You Can guy from the Leonardo DiCaprio movie. And, he knows a thing or two about scamming.
For sure, yeah.
And so now he's, on the other side of it, trying to give people the tools to be aware of these scams. But he was sharing with us that they've got the ability now to crawl through your social media with all the information we put online, and they can kind of put together these packages. So not only do they have the ability to create a voice that sounds like you, but they know things about your life. They can throw things in there. It was nice golfing with you last week, and you don't even think about it. Why would I think that could possibly not be? So it's something we really do need to address, and I just it's a problem that's gonna continue to get worse.
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem, and I think right now in our districts, we're just trying to raise awareness of this, right? Because it's important for people to know, like, hey, if any of this stuff happens to you, call the person, right? Make sure that it's legitimate. Call them back and make sure it's legitimate. Don't just, take it but it's kind of sad that you have to do that you have to mistrust these things so much. But
I think the AI discussion in the legislature this year is going to be really interesting, right? Because obviously artificial intelligence has the ability to, have all these positive impacts on our society and advancing, the quality of life for Californians and Americans and really everyone as a whole. But how you deal with it so that it can't be used in a negative way, and what policies are in place so we don't, have. Yeah. Obviously, we're California, right? We've got Silicon Valley. We want to be at the forefront here, but we got to make sure that we protect consumers as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a big year, I think, and we'll talk more in future podcasts, I'm sure, about the specific bills. But I think there's going to be a lot of bills on AI this year. I think it's a valid conversation. I worry that none of us are really experts on this topic, and so when you have a bunch of state legislators getting together to talk about these things, we don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of everything.
That's why I asked ChatGPT to write a bill to regulate itself, but it told me it wasn't a good idea to regulate it.
Okay, well, I'm actually not surprised that ChatGPT kind of wasn't a fan of that idea. I think this idea though of, and I introduced a resolution last year. It hasn't gone all the way through yet, but it's a resolution on the Assemblymembers principles that were adopted a few years back. On the creation of, responsible AI, making sure that, yes, AI has many applications that are very good potentially for technology and humanity, but on just like a lot of things, right? There's really good things and then there's really bad things, and it can be used for really bad purposes. And how do we balance those so that we have a responsible adoption of AI? And I think hopefully that'll continue to guide the discussion, but it is going to be a hot topic this year, and I think we're going to see at least 5 to 10 bills probably from our colleagues on this topic.
I would imagine so.
So enough of the recap. We'll look ahead a little bit now on, I guess we kind of already are with AI, but we'll look ahead at some of the other big issues I think that are coming towards us. And, the first question that I've been asking myself a lot lately is this finally the year that we reform Proposition 47? Obviously, Proposition 47 being the initiative passed by voters, about a decade ago now, actually, that reduced penalties for shoplifting, really reduced penalties for a lot of different crimes, from felonies to misdemeanors, and made it really difficult to prosecute some of the retail theft that we're seeing across our communities. Is this finally the year? What do you think? What have you been hearing?
Yeah, I know there's a couple of efforts going on in the assembly right now, and I know that my belief is the appetite in the legislature is there. I'm not entirely sure where the administration is. I know that in the governor's budget, what was that last week, 2 weeks ago now? It sounds like that the administration may be looking at a different approach, and so I think we'll get a bill to his desk. I think we'll be able to hopefully work with him and find something there. But yeah, it definitely seems like the legislature wants to take action and in a bipartisan way, which is, how we need to address it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, a number of, including myself, I introduced a bill last year, AB 75, to reform Proposition 47. I know a number of our colleagues did the same. Those were all shot down in the Public Safety Committee last year.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting how quickly, things change. And I think, so this was fascinating, this quote the other day from San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria. So he gave his State of the City address, and he used to be in the legislature, a more left-leaning member of their caucus. And he gave his State of the City address the other day, and he said, we should be locking up criminals, not laundry detergent, which sounds like something you'd hear on from like, a Republican. I mean, that's what you're hearing on talk radio right now, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And so I'm just, I was really kind of thankful to hear that. I think it's great to hear someone finally acknowledge that, yeah, it's not okay that they're locking up laundry detergent and toothpaste and socks, and some Targets are even locking up socks now. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, and it's having an impact on economies as well, because I mean, look, candidly, I'm not going to go walk around and have a personal shopper with. How do you even do this? I don't know. We don't have anything locked up in my district just yet, but up here in Sacramento, I just went to the neighborhood Target store, and man, you're just trying to get some deodorant and toothpaste, and you got to go find someone, have them open it up. It's easier to just order it on Amazon, and you have to imagine that has a negative impact on some of these brick and mortar stores and retailers. So I think it's on us to make a change here, and I really am hopeful that there's an appetite this year to move forward on it.
No, I agree. I think it was really interesting. Some people I've heard don't believe this, that they're locking this stuff up. They're like, no, that's not real. It's like, well, not in every community, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, my district is kind of similar to yours, where we haven't really gone that route yet. There hasn't been a need for it. But there are districts, particularly in some of the more populated areas, that are doing that. That's like a real thing. And it's it really shouldn't be that way. And I'm glad to see that there's this bipartisan consensus forming. So my bill from last year would have actually allowed higher penalties, so like a felony or jail time for someone who is caught doing this multiple times. So like a serial theft offender, right? Which is really a lot of the problem, is that you can steal from one store, that's one offense. Then you can go to another store and do it again. That's also a misdemeanor. So you can't add them up. They don't carry over. And so you can keep committing these crimes over and over again. My bill attempted to address that, was voted down in the Public Safety Committee. But later today, we're recording this on Monday, I'm actually doing a press conference with Assemblymember Ramos, who has now introduced almost the same bill, which I just think is fascinating. Like, someone on the other side of the aisle willing to introduce this bill that I fought for last year, I'm very thankful for. So I'm going to be joining him to kind of talk about this more and really support that effort. But I think it's a really good sign. So
yeah, and it's important that we take a balanced approach here. Obviously, the concerns of the majority party that we hear all the time are we don't want to criminalize poverty, and I don't think that's what we want to do. But you're starting to see organized retail theft at such a scale that we do need to give law enforcement the tools to keep our communities safe and keep our businesses safe. And so I think working in a bipartisan manner to get something like this done is the exact right approach. And appreciate that you're going to be working on it with Assemblymember Ramos. That's great.
I'm excited about that. And I think to your point about the administration and where are they, I think that is a valid concern. There's also talk of a ballot initiative, right, that could be going on the ballot to reform Proposition 47. That might give legislators and the governor the necessary incentives, right, to actually do something real.
Yeah.
And so time will tell on that, but we'll report back at a future podcast, I'm sure. So also, another story that's coming towards us. So there is this new monthly fixed charge on electricity that was passed a couple years back. It's in the works, particularly would impact investor-owned utility customers. So, your larger electric utilities, it would shift more costs from to customers based on how much they make versus how much they actually use. And so it's going to base some of these charges more on an income-based formula. So for some folks, it is going to raise their rates. and their bills, their energy bills. And for other folks, I think everyone's actually going to see an increase in this fixed charge. But I think it's a lot of people are going to see an increase on their bill. That's something that I'm super concerned about as we get closer to this being implemented. Has not been implemented yet, but it is something that I think people should be aware of, and I think it's a conversation the legislature is going to have this year as well.
Well, and just for the record, this was passed before you and I were here, right?
Correct. So it was not something that we supported.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, California's got an affordability crisis, and it's driven by two things. It's driven by housing costs and by energy costs.
Yep.
And, we're continuing to see that energy bills are making it more challenging for folks to make ends meet here. And, if these are kitchen table issues that I think are just on so many people's minds, whether it's, the cost of gasoline, the cost of your electricity bill. In my district, particularly, it gets pretty warm in the summer. I think, we've got days up to 120 degrees. And, you just need to make sure that you can keep the house at a livable temperature here without breaking the bank. And you'll see bills that are more than your mortgage. And you're just like, wow, how do you make that happen? So, continuing to increase costs there is something we really need to be cognizant of. And, just philosophically, I'm opposed to this approach, right? I don't know that we should be looking at I have a million questions about implementation, about how this is going to actually work. Are we self-reporting this? Are we do I need to submit my tax return into my utility company to get service? Not sure that that's as well thought out as it should have been. But just philosophically, I don't know that we should be punishing people for, being higher income earners in this state. And, it seems to me that with electricity use or energy use, you should pay for what you use. That's a pretty fair way to do it.
It's a very fair way to do it. And it's interesting because we already have a lot of great low income programs, right? For people that need more assistance. There's a lot of assistance programs already in place to help keep the costs lower for low income residents. This one, it's really interesting. There's different proposals, but one of them would raise non-low income users by as much as $51 a month on their bill, which to your point, I mean, another $50 when you're already potentially, spending hundreds or thousands in some cases of dollars, depending on what time of year it is or where you live.
And that's
a ton of money.
That's really the thing about it, right? I mean, if it's an income-based thing, but you live in the Silicon Valley or you live in Los Angeles and you've got high housing costs and you're, you make a good salary on paper, but, reality is in certain areas of California, you're probably not living a whole lot better than folks who are making significantly less in other areas. Yeah, so is that really a fair approach?
No, it's a good point. And that's why I really do like the kind of the use-based approach, because it also is an incentive, right, to use less energy to keep your bill down. And I think that's something that a lot of Californians have already adopted. So definitely something to be aware of. I actually plan on introducing a bill on this in the next couple weeks, probably, and so we'll talk more about it in the future. But I really do want to see if, as a legislature, we can talk about whether this is the right approach going forward. So,
and I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think this was put in a budget trailer bill, right?
It was, yeah.
So it's not like this
very
went
little
through
input,
policy committees, and it wasn't really vetted as well as maybe it should have been, in my opinion.
It was shockingly little, transparency. It was barely in print for more than the minimum 3 days, right?
Yeah.
Before it was passed. Really was kind of snuck under the radar, and I feel like that's really doing a disservice to Californians too, because they couldn't even really weigh in on it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I don't think that's the right approach, and we've seen it a few times, or got to see it a few times last year, where some of these ideas that probably were more appropriate to be done through a policy bill were, put into a budget trailer bill. And I think that's exactly your point, a disservice to Californians. And happy to have another conversation about it. I think we should
stop doing policy in the budget.
Right. Exactly.
It's
exactly.
like, come on. Definitely is not how it's supposed to work. So I look forward to continuing that one. We're going to move to our clip of the week. So we kind of had, I don't know, were you involved at all, or did you hear from your local residents about this tackle football issue?
Yeah, I heard a lot from my local residents. I'm actually the vice chair of Arts, Entertainment, Sports, and Tourism. So that was the committee it went through.
Yeah.
I was there.
Oh my
I spoke on it.
So you spoke on it. You also voted against it. You were
Yeah.
one of the only people in the legislature that got a chance to do that.
Yeah, one of two. No, and you know what? It's so interesting. I really appreciate the author. I've got a
Yeah.
good relationship with Assemblymember McCarty there, and what he's trying to do. I mean, we all want to keep kids safe, and we want to protect them. And this idea of the concept that our kids could be getting CTE or contributing to CTE long term because they started these tackle football programs at an early age. It's a valid concern. There's merits on both sides of this debate. But we passed AB1. I think Sheriff Cooper, showed up and testified to this. We've limited the amount of contact kids can have. As someone who played Pop Warner since I was 8 years old and carried it into high school football, I think there's just a ton of advantages from a safety side of things. Learning the proper technique and proper form at an early age. Not to mention all the other numerous benefits of youth sports programs. But what really made it a challenge for me was just the idea of singling out youth football. And I think Sheriff Cooper actually talked about this and how this is accessible in a lot of disadvantaged communities. And it's an opportunity out, or an opportunity to be successful and find success. And I don't really understand why we would just look at football. What about boxing? What about hockey? What about lacrosse? I mean, even soccer, and they all have the same sort of concussion rates that you're seeing. So I just think that, we obviously want to have these conversations where we're going to continue to try and improve youth sports. We're all supportive of that. I think an outright ban was too far, and that was sort of what I said in my comments. And I'm appreciative that the author pulled the bill, and that we're going to be able to continue to have conversations about how we can keep kids safer without outright banning an activity.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is we all care about safety. That's why the legislature a few years back passed the California Youth Football Act to limit full contact practices and kind of put in some new safety regulations and things like that. And I think that is the better way to go than an outright ban. For those that aren't familiar with the bill, this bill attempted to ban youth football under the age of 12, which again, obviously a lot of community members were not supportive of. And so when that bill was proposed, and then obviously the committee heard it, we put together this little press conference last week, and I think it really reemphasizes the point that you just made. So we'll play this clip, and then we'll talk a little bit more.
I grew up in a really rough part of East Bakersfield called East Bakersfield. It's the type of neighborhood where you fight to and from school, and I mean every day. On my block, and I say this to you as a retired California State Peace Officer and someone who works at the Capitol periodically, I say to you that on my block, there were 3 young men. Please, if you hear anything today, hear this. One of those young men was tragically murdered. That doesn't always show up in the stat sheet. The other young man doing life in prison. The third young man is speaking to you today. Football has not just changed my life. Football has saved my life, just as it will across this country and as it has for 100 years.
So obviously, a lot of emotion there for someone that was really positively impacted by the game of football. But I think, just emphasizing this idea that, when you take these opportunities away from kids, you're potentially, taking away something that could really help them in their life as well. So.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, youth football had a tremendously positive impact on my life, and these are lifelong bonds you make. I actually had the opportunity to call my my youth football coach about this bill.
That's awesome.
I hadn't talked to him in probably 10 years, and he's still coaching. He's coaching high school football now down at Bellarmine in the San Jose area. But what was interesting that I actually wasn't aware of is the safety measures that have gone into place even since when I played. There's, coaching's an important part of it, right? Teaching kids how to tackle properly. I think it's called the Heads Up Tackling Program that coaches have to be certified in now. It was important for us to, bring safety to the forefront of the game. It's obviously a violent sport. And, I think this discussion is, something that doesn't need to be so polarized, and we're all working in the same direction. We all want the same things, but just a ban's not the best approach, and taking those opportunities away from so many kids isn't ideal. I hate to say this. Well, maybe I don't, but we're agreeing with the governor a lot today. I mean,
I know we are agreeing with the governor a lot today. So the governor came out and helped us out. I mean, he really did give an assist to killing this bill, which was, he came out right before our press conference and said he would veto the bill if it made it to his desk. My take at the press conference was, hey, let's make sure it doesn't get to his desk, right? Let's stop it here. And I was thankful to see the author pulled the bill prior to, basically saying it's not going to move forward this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a big victory for all the families and the coaches and obviously the athletes that came out in opposition.
Oh, and they came up to testify.
Oh, I know.
It was great.
It was awesome. I mean, so many people came to the Capitol to make their voices heard, which I was really thankful to see. And thankful to see that they got a win that quickly. Usually don't see it happen that quickly, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it was really good. But, to your point, I know you mentioned Sheriff Cooper spoke, which is actually the sheriff in my county, Sacramento County, in opposition to the bill. And one of the points he brought up is concussion rates for other sports are very similar, right? So it's, obviously football, I think, is an especially high contact sport. And there's safety protocols there that we need to implement or that have been implemented. But, my son plays basketball, right? He got clocked in the head at a game a couple weeks ago, broke his nose. I mean, there are a lot of brutal sports, right? And that's the reality of it.
Well, and I mean, there's an inherent risk in any activity that kids are going to be doing, whether it's, riding their bike down the street or participating in sports. And is it really appropriate for the legislature to come in with this sort of broad approach, one size fits all ban on one of these activities? I don't think so. I think there's better ways to address safety. So I'm glad to see that's the direction that we're going to be heading in.
No, I was thankful, and I think at the end of the day, it's really parents that need to be making these decisions. Not the government.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that we were able to get this victory for them. So, or to help get this victory for them. So before I let you go, I got to ask about the NFL playoffs because, your team is out, but. I just.
I'm a Raiders fan. I'm used to it.
You guys are in a little. You got a nice stadium, so
it's
got
a very
that.
nice stadium.
And
you been out there?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
Oh, you got to get out there.
And you're hosting the Super Bowl this year, right?
Yeah.
Allegiant or whatever. Yeah. So.
Well, maybe if
cool.
maybe if your Niners make it, you can make a trip.
I've actually thought about that. I'm like the idea of spending that much money to go to the Super Bowl is like. Just completely foreign to me. I don't even know what I would do. I looked at tickets to go to the NFC Championship game this weekend, and they're not even that bad. And I'm like, I just watched it on TV.
Yeah, well, you guys are in the NFC Championship game, so that's exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So did you watch any football over the weekend? Or?
I did. I was worried about your boys there for a little bit, but they pulled it off at the end. That was great.
That was one of the most stressful football games I've seen in a while.
Well, and I don't know any Bills fans, but I imagine they felt that their game was fairly stressful as well. And, so what are we going to have? We're going to have the Chiefs and the Ravens.
So it's going to be Ravens-Chiefs next weekend, and then
Lions, 49ers.
Lions, yeah.
I'm excited. I'm stoked for Lions fans.
I know.
Just as a fan of a perennially bad team, it is really exciting to see them, advance as far as they have.
Well, it's crazy. So over the weekend, there were 3 teams in the playoff picture still that have never won a Super Bowl: the Bills, the Lions, and the Texans, I think. And 2 of them got eliminated. So the Lions, they're keeping the hope alive.
Keeping the hope alive.
Sadly, the Niners are going to have to dash that hope on Sunday, but and I will not feel sorry about that.
All right. So what are your predictions then? Who makes it?
I
through?
think it'll be Ravens-Niners.
Ravens-Niners.
But you can never count Patrick Mahomes out. That guy is just a winner, right? And so. Him and Kelsey and Taylor Swift, they might bring it home for Kansas City. You just never know.
I was wondering if we were going to get that.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but I think one of my favorite moments from the football games over the weekend was drunk Jason Kelsey in the box, shirtless with the beer, and just yelling for. One of the most hilarious things that I saw. That was just so funny. So,
and it was snowing, right?
I don't remember.
Cold.
Was it snow? It was probably very cold.
It was cold.
I would assume in Buffalo. Yeah.
Yeah. Being a Palm Springs guy here, I can't imagine how he was feeling. But
man, I can't imagine watching a football game in Buffalo. Period. But But yeah, it was a fun time. So go Niners, hoping for the best there. But maybe the Raiders will get there again one day.
Let's hope
once they figure out their quarterback situation. We'll wrap it up there. Any final thoughts before we head out?
Just appreciate you having me on. I think this is a really cool podcast and
That's
getting
fun.
to have a conversation about what's going on. So I'm looking forward to working with you this year and glad to be back up in session.
Likewise. No, really looking forward to it. Nothing to announce this week. If you got ideas for future shows, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. You can follow the podcast on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook @pointoforderpod. And you can also follow the host today on Twitter or X. I still call it Twitter. I'm really bad at this.
I almost called it Point of Order on, the name of your podcast on Mr. Assemblymember Joe Patterson when he called it Twitter on the floor. I thought that would have been funny. Point of Order.
That would have been really funny because I almost never call it X on this podcast. But @Joshua_Hoover for me on X, and then @Greg R. Wallis. Which do you prefer people follow you at? Greg R. Wallis is good? Or?
Yeah, that one's great.
Cool. Yeah, so follow us on X. We try to keep people updated on what's going on too on there. But appreciate you coming out, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, thanks for having me on.